amending the CUP.
I have a motion.
To accommodate.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
So,
Councilman
Mr. Mayor,
Walsh.
thank you. I'll say what others have said. When I heard this coming our way, my first thought was, ooh, I thought they were going to do that later. I thought they were going to keep it at South Campus and not move it. That was my first reaction, which I think a lot of people in the community had same first reaction. But I do also have in the back of my head, and I don't know if it was, I don't think I went to any of the town meetings, but we got some briefings as this went through the first time. For now, it was always for now, it was going to be at South Campus. It didn't surprise me that it was moving to North Campus. It surprised me it was moving already, and I asked a few questions and found out, okay, able to acquire some more houses, able to make it work now. All right, earlier than I thought, but always in my back of my head, it was sort of for now. The second thing I thought when I heard this was coming our way was, oh, good, we can update the traffic study. Because the traffic study we did for this original project was done during COVID, and I never really felt confident. And I know they did the best they could, you know, but nobody was driving around when we were trying to do a traffic study to figure out how many people were going to be driving on. And I live on Bald Eagle Avenue. The traffic is going to affect my house, not nearly, I'm a little bit, you know, south, but people are going to leave school and go all the way down my house on their way out to 96. It's already kind of a feeder, and so it will affect me. But I'm glad we updated the traffic study. I'm glad we have better data. I think I've spent some time in it. It looks like we have better data. So I'm supportive. I'm kind of in the camp where, you know, it's 4 nights a year. I'm in the camp of it's a cool place to live. And it's going to be an amenity, and it's going to be a benefit. It's going to be a benefit to downtown. It's going to be a benefit to the neighborhood. And I'm assured by the discussion we just had about all the different things we can do from a strategic perspective to allay parking concerns, and we'll be very responsive, and I know the school district will be too. And as we always say, change is hard. It sounds bad. Let's get it done. Let's get it in, see what it's like, and then we can adjust as we go. But it's never as bad as people think, and we always think it's going to be coming in. So I hope that's the case here, and we'll be ready to react if we need to.
Councilmember Hughes.
I'm just wondering if it is worth putting at least the no parking areas into this part now, since those were necessary at the site at South anyway, so that we can start off with that without having residents have to come back in here, ask for what South already has, and to provide that.
Sorry, I think we have the language in there for one of the restrictions. I think staff can correct me if I'm wrong, it gives us broad discretion that the school district is going to work with the city to figure out where those areas are needed to have no parking signs. So, I mean, we could flesh it out more, but I think the language probably covers us for what to alleviate potential concerns down the road.
And part of what I want to do is just make clear to everybody else that that's also there.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, what is currently called for is, again, the parking restrictions to be maintained on Division, a key ingress and egress out of the campus. To add that, to work with the county to get the no parking added to Bald Eagle on the east side. The conditions allow it open-ended for the, I'll call it the neighborhood permit parking area. We don't know what that's going to be yet. Some of this, it makes more sense to wait until, you know, right now we have crazy traffic on Bald Eagle because they're working on the east side of the campus. Once everything is complete and done, we will know better how traffic flows and moves around the campus. Or, you know, if parking, you know, there's many more parking spots at on the new campus than there was at South Campus currently. So let's wait and see what the issues are, how far we have to go out. Adding signs or working through that neighborhood process is maybe meant to be more of a reactive thing to see how things go once everything is in place. Today we don't know what that looks like. All the high school kids aren't there. We don't know who's parking where, how quickly people are getting out, how easy it is to park in the parking lot. So initially, from a safety standpoint, just adding the Bald Eagle no parking is what we're anticipating.
Okay. My concern is simply that people shouldn't have to ask 15 times for their to be able to get in and out of their driveway. And I guess I have one follow-up to that. In terms of timing, we're doing, a lot of this requires road work, and, that's the greatest season around here. And I realize that this is all tied up in the CUP, but is there a chance that a stadium event, a large stadium event will take place without any of these other requirements in place?
Mayor, members of the council, so the way the condition is written is it's tied to the certificate of occupancy for the expansion of the bleachers. So it says that the road improvements need to be completed to the satisfaction of the city engineer prior to them getting a certificate of occupancy for the expanded bleachers. So the 1,500 bleachers as they are right now, events that were planned associated with that size and scale, are approved under the current approvals. But we did specifically tie the completion of the road improvements to the granting of a CO to be able to use the expanded bleachers.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Jones.
Mayor, so for the reasons I kind of stated, but there are reasons. The stadium currently has already been scheduled with an estimate 30-plus games, albeit with lighter traffic, but with light and sound. We're adding maybe 5 events, 6 if you're really lucky. There is more parking spots. 6 exits versus 1 is a big one for me, as well as you pull out of South Campus, you really only have one direction to go. You go north. Maybe people are savvy enough to go south to go back north. Most aren't. And you sit there at that intersection at County Road E, and anybody who lives anywhere near there like me, you don't go near the neighborhood because you know it's Tangletown for a good portion of time. I do have a belief in the city and the district staff that they will work together. It is for, I'm comparing an average football game to what's happening twice every single day, or what will be. Traffic, we all know, I think as council members, at best, we're hoping is good to begin with. We're not going to be able to predict that, as Mr. Kelpie said. There's going to be struggles, there's going to be problems, there's going to be issues. I don't think 4 events a year is going to make that tipping point. I'm not going to push an amendment to the CUP. Be respectful for other events. I don't see the benefit. We're asking to come back into this neighborhood that has not had a lighted stadium with speakers and that for 35 years. I think that's fair to limit that. But if you want to talk an ice arena with this purchase, give me a call. Yeah, I know, I went there. But I think there's a lot of reasons that are good reasons, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your time.
Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to support the resolution. I've asked my questions because I wanted to be clear that the expansion met the terms and conditions required for CUP amendments. I'm convinced that they are. Having done that, I want to show an important issue for me is showing deference and respect for the action of other elected bodies. The school district is governed by individuals elected by the public, and if there are people who believe that they were misinformed, misled, whatever, or that their judgment has been impaired, that's an issue for them to settle at the ballot box, and that's an accountability that's built into our system. I would be very hesitant about this elected body taking over the work and the judgment that's entitled to a different body. I think we've kept our conversations to our appropriate area of jurisdiction and conversation. I'm satisfied with that, so I'm going to vote in support of the resolution.
Councilmember Hughes.
I actually want to say very similar things. I don't think my role here is to go back and revote the bond. So to not support the stadium in some form really doesn't seem like it's my job. Having said that, it is my job to represent people at Ward 2 and anybody who's having a traffic problem because of this, and that's why it is important to me to make sure that we are trying to mitigate those problems all along. We spent, I don't know how long 6 weeks ago talking about an apartment building of 15 spots where we had, 8 people that might possibly be at a Christmas party on the other side of Bel Air, where this is 170 people parking in the neighborhood. It is a big deal. It does deserve our time and attention, and I just want to make sure people know, I think the city is always very responsive. I did ask the question, how many people have complained so far about traffic coming in and out of the high school? It's less than the amount on one hand that has addressed those problems with the city. So if you have any, please bring them up, because I know that you guys have been working on it. There's a traffic committee there that also works on it. So we can't fix what we don't know about. And I want to make sure that we're finding solutions for all of that. But I think that, I can't not. So I'll be supporting the resolution, I guess.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion for approving the resolution to amend the school district's conditional use permit? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, abstain due to being an employee of this district.
And 1 abstention, so the motion carries, the resolution passes. Go Bears. All right, we'll jump into item 8B, variance request for the monument sign for the McNeely Music Center. Mr. Lindahl, whenever you're ready.
No, wait a few minutes for the moments for the room to clear if you'd like. Otherwise, I can just jump right in.
You can jump in.
Okay. As you mentioned, the application before you is a request on behalf of the McNeely Music Center site and their representatives for a ground sign variance for their redevelopment site at 4910 Highway 61. This application included a public hearing at the Planning Commission that produced no comments but conversation from the applicant and the Planning Commission. Ultimately, the Planning Commission followed suit with the staff's recommendation for denial of this variance. Just to give you some quick background, there's significant detail regarding the recommendation for denial in your packet. But the site plan and specifications for the sign are all detailed in your packet and shown here on the site. They're proposing, the proposal is to reorient their sign to be, rather than parallel, but perpendicular to Highway 61 to increase its visibility. And the space they have in the lower left-hand corner of their site diagram here is shown for the site proposed location of their sign. Staff did just create a modified version of their proposed schematic. The proposed one with the 3-inch setback on the left side, and then a diagram of proposing their proposed sign with the current 2-foot setback that was approved through a previous variance. So some of the conversation that occurred compared throughout the review of this proposal looked at other signs along Highway 61 and the setbacks related to them. So in the midpoint of this particular drawing, you see the proposed site and the approximate location of their existing sign, and then comparing it to the sites both north, which is the hotel site, and then the office building site to the south. And as you can see, there are some closer setbacks for the property to the north, but in the context of a significantly different right-of-way size for Highway 61. So the variance criteria that are used, the criteria that are used to review variances, as the council may remember, are detailed in state statute. And so we look at each one of those findings to make a determination on a recommendation from staff and the Planning Commission. And so we would, your staff report goes through in much more detail staff's findings related to these. But really what I guess I would, and I'm happy to answer any questions related to those. But the context that I would say ultimately came down to the decision or the recommendation that came from staff is based on the previous variances that were requested and granted to the applicant to create the site as they have now, and the fact that the applicant requested those conditions and then basically was left with the conditions on site and the locations of signage that result from those conditions that they requested. And so it really comes down to, whether or not there's reasonable use of the property. They certainly have a previous variance that gets them a sign, a previous variance from the 10-foot standard down to 2 feet that gets them a sign. And that the unique circumstances related to the property that require the need for the variance aren't created by the landowner. And in this case, clearly they are. They're a result of variances, not just existing conditions that were there over time, but the applicant's chosen design to maintain the site conditions that they had. And so, again, I'm happy to go through things in more detail if the council has specific questions, but I just wanted to give you kind of the variance breakdown and the recommendation and the rationale that staff is bringing to this, because we don't make a recommendation for denial lightly. We understand the interests and the needs of different property owners. But in this particular circumstances, given the requests of the applicant down to 3 inches from 10 feet, and that they already had a setback down to 2 feet that was previously approved, we just didn't see a practical difficulty that allowed for a recommendation other than denial in this particular case. And then I'd stand for questions.
Thank you. At this time, we would hear from the applicants if anyone wants to speak to this issue.
Mayor, City Council, my name is Sean Higgins. I am the project manager, PA, with MSR Design, representing the owner. Primary contact for Jason and the city planners, working with them over the last year to redevelop the site. First, we just want to kind of set the ground. The site is being developed into a music center. Our goal is to have a very community-oriented place for folks, and especially kids who lack access to high-quality music education, to have it. The site has 18 per level, 18 studios, teaching studios, and then a basement recording studio that will be state-of-the-art. The variance itself was developed, the original variances that were approved in 2022 were developed in close coordination with the city planners at the time, trying to replicate the existing conditions as close as possible. The new variances are differentiate by inches from the previous one. This new variance is really just more about public safety. We want the sign to face traffic on 61. It makes it easier for folks coming up and down the road to see the sign rather than having a parallel. We're not arguing that the sign could go on the existing location, but we think the practical difficulty of having a sign that affects public safety is a good reason to approve a variance. I'm also joined by the client's attorney, who can probably speak better to the practical difficulties and the items surrounding more of the legal ramifications.
Thank you, Mr. Higgins.
Yeah, I would just, I think a couple points. I mean,
For the record.
Sorry. My name is Brian Bell. I'm an outside counsel for the Manitou Fund, which is the parent of the owner of the property. And I think that we agree that the current variances are driven by the variances that this council approved. I don't know when it was, about a year ago or so. But to us, that underscores that practical difficulties are what caused the need for this variance, because obviously when this council approved the previous variances, it found that practical difficulty, specifically the shape of the lot, necessitated those variances, and those variances are then driving the need for this variance. And so it's just an extension of the awkward shape of the lot that is the need for this variance, and that is really what underscores or is really the crux of the standard. I would also note, there was one comment at the Planning Commission by one of the commissioners that the design of the lot is what created a challenge for the placement of the sign, and that's why this commissioner didn't vote for it. Well, that's exactly the point. It's the shape of the lot. In your ordinance, it provides that a variance may be granted to alleviate practical difficulties such as problems caused by lot shapes. So really, that's a reason to grant the variance, not to deny it. The other, just point that I would make is that there was some discussion at the Planning Commission that would this create a precedent, and I think each just has to be decided on its own merits. If there is practical difficulties in other situations that are similar to this, it is a precedent. But just because there is another location nearby that requests a variance, if they don't have the similar awkward shaped lot that demands a variance, it's up to this council or the Planning Commission to deny that variance. The degree to which it sets precedent is not really germane. And then I'll just conclude on, if you look at your packet, we've got a number of images in there that show the lot design that shows the shape, and then also just the very large right-of-way on Highway 61. And so, although it is a 3-inch setback, it's still 31 feet from the actual road and a number of feet, I believe, from the from the sidewalk itself. And if I could find that picture, I could. It's in the packet. It's picture A211. On my PDF, it's page 103. But I think that just really highlights, the just dramatic distance between where the sign will be and where the actual right-of-way is. And so for these reasons, because there are practical difficulties due to the awkward shape of the lot, we'd ask that you approve the variance, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. First off, I'm excited to see the McNeely Music Center. I think it's going to be a great asset to the community. Looking forward to it, and I'm happy that the Manitou Fund is choosing to invest in the community. Having said that, to me, the notion of a sign that needs to be 21 inches closer, otherwise it creates a practical difficulty, is just a level that I can't get to, and I'm basing that on the sound advice of city staff and the city attorney. So to me, it's kind of as simple as that. I'm looking at your picture here, and if this is to scale, the idea of that having to be 21 inches further to the east, I'm not sure that makes much of a difference. Certainly not enough to create a practical difficulty if it didn't move 21 inches to the west. So that's where I stand. Council, what would we like to do?
Mr. Mayor, I think I'm confused by this. So is this I was looking at that same picture. This is the proposed sign. It is, it's the color photo.
Color photo is the proposed sign, yes, in the orientation I'm sorry. Your question about the color photo, that is the proposed sign in our requested orientation.
So is that just taking the sign that would have been, were you thinking you would do the exact same sign, but you're just turning its orientation? Or was this?
It would be a different sign, but the idea is that it can't be 21 feet or inches east, because otherwise it's parallel to the road. It needs to be farther west to be perpendicular to the road.
There's not enough space there to make it closer to the building rather than closer to the road?
So the existing signage variance puts a 2 feet setback, which if you can see here on the screen, which will be on the right, in order to have a sign that has language on it that's legible at distance for folk driving in a car especially. It needs to be probably like 6 inches tall, the lettering that is. At minimum, ADA demands something around for something at 40 feet, 40 to 50 feet. And so to simply just to have a word on the sign, we found that right around 2'6" was a safe bet for a width to say McNeely. And so that then would put us well into the setback. And so our request is to then being able to turn the sign so that we can have language on the sign that is legible at distance.
But why don't you just put it closer to your building rather than closer to the street?
Sure. The distance that you see on the left from the right side of the sign to the back side of the curb is probably about 6 to 8 inches. So we certainly.
Okay, so this picture, I wish I could tell you what page this was. This picture makes it look like you can put like 3 wheelchairs through there.
Mayor and council, I'm sorry, I didn't include that as one of the slides, so
No,
I
it's okay,
apologize.
but I mean, this isn't you. That's why I'm just confused, because I'm looking at this and I'm saying, move it. Why wouldn't you? There's a woman sitting there having a cup of coffee on the bench. She doesn't need that space, right?
Unless there's
So
cafe
pushing-
permitting,
Unless it's what?
cafe permitting.
So maybe to get to your point about pushing the sign further towards the building. Right now, what we have in front of the building is a driveway, which we worked closely with Kurt from the fire marshal to ensure that we had safe access. We actually expanded the existing drive so that they can get their emergency equipment in safely. So the curb that you see, so there's a gray part and then there's a speckled part. That's the curb that's proposed. That's been worked out. So moving it any closer to the building
Sure,
would
it's
put it
just
into
not even-
the drive.
It's not even useful. Okay, great, okay. So
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
just
I-
useful as far as what the sign may look like, but as far as.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that
there,
there can't be a sidewalk there where people are walking. That's actually going to be a driveway.
Okay.
For access and safety issues. The purpose of this is just to show the distance between the road and the sign itself, if it's
Okay.
perpendicular to the road.
Councilmember Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to, I certainly disrespectfully, that's probably more true, respectfully disagree with staff. I mean, and I know you take this very seriously when in denial, but I don't agree with the harmony. Maybe the harmony in the intents of the big picture of the city overall, but if I'm driving up Highway 61, I'm looking at Express Lane, or first, I mean, Ace Hardware, right off the bat, that sign is unbelievable, is large and close, and I voted to support that. Moving on to what's now Express Lane, you've got this huge awning that is very close to Highway 61, as well as their sign, which is right on the sidewalk. And then keep moving over to the other side, you've got the beautiful car wash, or whatever the heck it's gonna be.
It's beautiful.
That, you know, is whatever, is very, so I disagree with the overall harmony, but I understand what the city is trying to protect. But my point is, looking at this sign, and Ms. Hughes, I was looking at the same picture, and if that sign doesn't check whether it's a sidewalk or a drive, doesn't matter to me. The size, the setback with what the highway is allotting, this just seems, the horse is already out of the barn in this area. It's a lovely looking sign. I want to give this center the best opportunity that they have. And we can sit here all day, Mr. Attorney and Mr. Planner, and can say, well, you created it. I don't care. It's like, well, this is a good spot for the sign, although I do care. Yeah, you get elected. And I just don't see this as setting a precedent, because other things have already happened in the neighborhood. That's my personal view, but I totally respect where staff is coming from. So I'm actually going to be against the denial.
Anyone else on the council have a thought? I'd like to hear from our city attorney about what, sorry, Ms. Hughes, just.
No, it's okay. All I was going to say is if this had been in the original packet, I'm not sure I would have even blinked. in the original variances. And so I think there's part of it that's like it's kind of an irritant that it's come up again, but I'm not sure that I would have been upset with it to begin with. But maybe, I don't know, I'm not trying to doubt you. I'm just saying, would we have had a conversation about it had it been in the original variance packet, do you think? Because of these same things? I mean, I get what you're saying, it's like you created this problem. But
Mayor, members of the council, so it's difficult for me to go back in time at a point where I wasn't with the city and part of the conversations, because the applicant and the staff at the time had significant conversations about trying to come up with the best possible design for the site and the applicant's needs. But to try to more directly answer your question, I think that if I was in place at the time when when the original site plan went through,
Yeah.
and the same variance was before us, staff would have the same analysis that we do right now. But that, again, is staff's analysis and the best advice we're trying to give you based on our judgment and experience.
right.
So I'd like to have our city attorney weigh in, because I'll note that there's been training that's happened with the planning department, and we're trying as a community to make sure we're applying the proper legal standard, having some consistency. And I think for that reason, Mr. Lindahl and the planning staff has said just that. We're applying what a practical difficulty is. But it sounds like there's an appetite on the council for saying, we're not going to lose any sleep if we got to shift that sign 21 inches and give them a 3-inch variance. So I'd like to know from a legal standpoint what discretion this body has and where we can go with this. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council. I guess from a larger, taking a step back, when it comes to determining whether or not to grant a variance, the council does have discretion. In other words, you have discretion to say no, more than you would if it was just a routine sort of like a conditional use permit. There's a presumption that goes along with if they propose a use that you've already went through a policy perspective and determined that it's an allowed use, just with conditions added, there's a presumption you're going to grant those. With the variance, that presumption isn't there. The burden is really placed on the applicant to prove up that practical difficulties exist. So they have the burden of proving it, but you also are limited by that in your discretion as a council, that you cannot grant the variance unless you truly do find that practical difficulties exist. The upheaval to the statute that happened several years ago was just that, a neighbor challenging a council granting a variance when they challenged that the standards weren't met in the statute. Now, that was a previous statute that resulted in a change in this practical difficulties. You all remember the undue hardship standard? That's the case that ended up having that removed from the statute, and now we've moved to the practical difficulties. My point in raising that is that it's not unfettered discretion to grant variance. You do need to find that practical difficulties exist. Now, there's sometimes confusion around what that actually means. So let me just read 2 sentences from the statute. It says practical difficulties as used in connection with granting a variance means the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the zoning ordinance. The plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner, and the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. So that's the thrust of what the statute says on that. So it comes down to the council determining that, all respect to the applicant's attorney. I don't think it's true that just because you granted some variance that necessarily there's practical difficulties for additional variances. I mean, I think each one of those variances have to be reviewed for their own existence of practical difficulties, though I do agree that just because you grant one here or the neighboring property doesn't mean you are forever, legally speaking, subject to having to grant these in the future. I will tell you, and as you see in your own packet, people will use this as leverage to make these arguments. Again, it's more of a political position than it is a legal position, but like you see in here, there's pictures of other things. People always do that, frankly. They always want to say, see, you granted it over there, so you should grant mine. It doesn't compel you to do that, but it's a consideration. So spoke a lot, but it really comes down to, did the applicant prove up practical difficulties exist for this particular variance? You found it existed with respect to the variance that was previously granted, but that doesn't necessarily compel you to grant it down to 3 inches.
Thank you. That was helpful, at least for me, because I think the mandate to the council should always be, are we legally correct? And then we can have policy discussions about whether or not we care about 21 inches here or 21 inches there. But that's my overarching concern, is are we following the law and applying it correctly? So I think that's helpful. Council, what would we like to do with this? We have a resolution before us that upholds or at least adopts the denial from the Planning Commission. What are we thinking we'd like to do?
Mayor, could I just interrupt with one additional point? Could I ask the city attorney just to elaborate from a process perspective, what the options for the council are?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that, because I realized after I stopped speaking that I intended to include that. Obviously, you have a resolution before you deny the variance. So if the council is inclined to act on that, well, then that's done. Now, obviously, if you're inclined to grant the variance, then what I would ask the council to do is to pass a motion directing staff to prepare a resolution to bring it back approving. So you're not actually approving tonight. It would be direction to staff to prepare that approval resolution. That way the appropriate findings can be developed and put into the resolution. Because one thing I always like to remind councils is that there are neighbors. And just like that Krummenacher case that I mentioned that resulted in this is, neighbors can sue too. So we want to make sure that you have proper findings before you if you're inclined to approve. So I assume there's time on the clock to allow for this to be brought back in a couple weeks. If not, I suspect the applicants would be willing to grant an extension to allow an approval resolution to come back.
Yes, Mr. Richard.
It would be a matter of asking if there's a motion to approve the denial resolution. If that is either not made or is made and fails, then it would come back to the council to ask, do you want to make the motion to direct staff to prepare and bring that back at the next meeting? So yes, in a sense, it would be a continuance in the second situation.
So, is anyone willing to move the resolution denying the application for a variance?
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I do not have a second. The motion fails for lack of a second. I'd entertain a motion to direct staff to do some more spade work on this and bring it back to council at the next meeting with a resolution approving this with findings of fact. Who's willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second? I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, and this will come back to the council at the next meeting. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, council.
All right, the last item on our agenda, item 9, a concept plan review for 2687 County Road D. Mr. Lindahl, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, I will jump forward to our next case here. Thank you. The case before you is a concept plan review for the property located at 2687 County Road D. In this case, the concept is the proposal would include a 12-unit nursing home facility. As part of this process, this concept plan review process that we put in place just at the beginning of the year, it does require a neighborhood meeting, which did occur. And there were no members of the public that attended that meeting, although Councilmember Edberg, whose ward this is, did attend that meeting along with staff, and so there were no other public speakers at that meeting. In summary, generally the Planning Commission was supportive of the request or the concept plan. The staff report again goes into a lot more detail for you, but just to kind of hit the highlights for you here, the applicant has created a concept site plan for the proposed 14-unit nursing home building, single-story building, so height is conforming. But part of their proposal and the need for the concept plan here is that in order to approve this particular use, the applicant would also need to rezone the property. The current zoning doesn't allow for nursing home facilities, but the proposal to rezone the property would allow the use, but then may also require a couple of deviations depending on the final design and makeup of the site. And most notably, that would be for the east side of the property, the setback requirement under the rezoning would be 30 feet, and the applicant's proposing just over 10. So, as I mentioned in the concept plan, they went through the neighborhood meeting, the planning commission, and are now here before our council for comment. Future potential review process would include, again, a rezoning from the current B2 limited business to the RB residential business transition, which allows for uses similar to this to be a transition from the commercial areas next to it to the residential areas to the north of this. It's likely that a plan unit development for at least the setback deviation in relation to the adjacent commercial use would be necessary, and then approval by the watershed district. So given that, really the next steps are to take any potential comment that could be here tonight before the council and provide direction back to the applicant about the council's general thoughts for the concept. And similar to this process in the past, staff's outlined just a couple of key questions. Do you support or oppose the general concept as it is before you? Would you generally support the proposed rezoning that is necessary for this particular use? Would the council support the use of a plan unit development to allow deviations, most specifically in this case, the setback? And should the council support a PUD, are the things that the council would like this request from a community standpoint in exchange for that? So that's a quick summary of this process. This is now the second or third one of these we've been through, so happy to answer questions about process or more specifics about the rezoning if that's necessary, but I'd stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lindo. Is the developer here, and if so, do they have anything they'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Brian Wingus, 3900 Van Dyke Street here in White Bear, and I founded the Sweet Living Memory Care facilities. You've probably seen them popped up all over town. I've since divested of those. I also founded I don't know if you've been through Wisconsin, but Comforts of Home. So I've been doing this for, God, I'm starting to get old myself, but about 25 years now going on. And what we're trying to do is, this will be named Digna Suites. And I still am specializing in that 32-bed community-based memory care model, but we're trying to create a smaller model which we can fit in closer into the neighborhoods, making it easier for the staff and families to get their parents into. It's a secure memory care. And as you can see, this is a difficult site to develop. So that's one reason we want to use the plan use development. And we need a little bit of help with the setback. That area where the setback is would have a fence, because mainly because of the health codes and everything else. So it'll be a buffer zone there, and we'll have it well landscaped. And we'll work with the watershed. We'll probably have underground holding for the for drainage and everything else. So we're going to be working with staff very closely on some of those things where we do need variances. We over-landscape these things aggressively because it's marketing 101. I like these places to look like someplace you want to move into right away. I don't want to have it wait for several years. So things of that nature. Like I said, it's a secure facility. We variance down. Nobody drives, so it's all it's only staff. I wish people visited their parents more often and that we had a need for more parking, but we generally don't. We have empirical evidence from other buildings to show, and I can bring it from cities and everything else, that we mean what we say what we mean when we don't need extra parking. So it's a low impact, low traffic model, so we're not going to impact the city city services or anything like that. It's a perfect use for that difficult site, and I got nothing but positive and great feelings from the neighbors, including the residential neighbors across the street. Once everybody understands that it's not a group home or things like that. So that gives you a little background, and then from there I'll let you ask me direct questions. Fair enough?
Sounds good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. I'll just kick things off. This all just makes sense. I have no objections. I mean, I know based on some limited knowledge, there's a huge need for these memory care and assisted living facilities. This one looks relatively small. I know that area pretty well. It butts up against the freeway. It's kind of set back, so I have no objections. And at this stage where you're just looking for feedback, keep moving forward. That's where I'm at. Councilmember Edberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I had the opportunity to attend the public meeting. It was a very small and tidy conversation. For all the reasons the mayor just mentioned, it's a one-story building. It's on a very difficult to develop site. It probably does deserve the conversation about setbacks and modifications that would be required to meet our standard approaches. But there's, in my mind, clearly a community need for these types of services. I'm not aware of any challenges to the ability of the developer to deliver on the project, and I've not had any negative feedback from anyone within my ward that speaks negatively. So I see no reason not to encourage and move on.
Anyone else on the council have a thought? Councilmember Walsh.
Well, you said what I was thinking, perfect use of a hard-to-develop site. I mean, that's the way I looked at it. So, thank you.
Councilmember Engstrand.
I agree. Just make sure next time you come, you know where the sign's going to go.
Well, listen, that's a hard act to follow, by the way. I won't be asking for variances at 2 inches. I've never seen that in my life, so good luck to you.
Fair enough. Any other thoughts from the council?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Jones.
any stormwater? I mean, that's the only thing I can actually think of that I
We'll do the retention
there's just
underneath.
enough-
We'll have
there's
some
enough room.
cisterns. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to, believe me, we've worked with the watersheds
Right.
before, all over and that's going to be one of our pickles that we're going to have to deal with.
let's make a deal and get a chunk somewhere else. And
We're going to have to put the cisterns underneath and do the drainage right down there, and that's going to be my bogey.
awesome. That's great.
I've been there, done it.
And
Better than
Brueggemann.
crack.
Brueggemann would be the builder on this, is that?
Brueggemann, he's probably not going to be the builder. We're going to probably do some modular. That's going to be the next big thing that we're going to work on to try to template these so that we can slide them into some of the neighborhoods nicely. He may be a partner. He's done these before with me, and so, but notwithstanding that, whether it doesn't matter whether he partners or not. So yeah. He's involved at some point, though.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
We will have to replat it to separate it's a single lot, both sides right now, but we'll have to, staff knows we're doing that, and we're working on that. We've got some work to do, but before we do that, we wanted to kind of get everybody's blessing so that we don't trip ourselves up and get all the way through it and then find out somebody doesn't like it. So the planning commission was unanimous and said, go get them, Tiger. So.
Yeah, well, that's how this new process is supposed to work. So any other thoughts from the council? I think you have your feedback. Keep plugging along. We like the idea and look forward to seeing the designs and the project develop.
I think you'll love it. I mean, it's an activity-based model, and it's, you know, we'd like to get all the residents into the main area, and it's that end of life, high level of care that most of the big places don't take care of, and that's our forte.
Great. Thank you.
Fair enough?
Fair enough. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, item 10, communication from the city manager. Ms. Crawford.
I have no communications tonight, Mayor.
Wonderful. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you.